In this section, we're going to be looking at shading techniques. We're going to start off with looking at gradients, and then applying stippling, and then finally looking at some line gradients. And we're going to apply these decorations to the quote, "Do one thing every day that scares you." Zooming in on the word "one thing," that's the word we're going to apply the gradient to. Opening up the layers panel, you'll see there's two layers called "one thing." We've got a black outline and a solid grey colour. We're going to apply the effect to the solid grey colour. The black outline is there to make it a bit bolder and stand out a bit. So pressing the plus icon, we're going to add a new layer, making sure we've got a mid-grey colour and the monoline brush. The reason why I'm doing it in black and white and grey is just so that we don't get hung up about colours. We can just focus on these decorations and applying them. So what you want to do is draw a line straight through your lettering, make sure there's a bit of space either end, and then join that shape up, making sure there's no holes, filling any holes, and there's a bit of space either end. And then grabbing a mid-grey colour, dragging it into that shape, it fills it. And at the moment it looks a bit weird, but what we're going to do is, opening up the layers panel, we are going to restrict this shape to the shape of the letters, and this is called a clipping mask. So if I click on that layer where the thumbnail is and click clipping mask, it restricts everything on that layer to the layer below, which is our lettering. So now if I was to draw anywhere else on this, it wouldn't show anywhere apart from over our lettering. It's a really useful thing because it means that we can erase and do effects on that without affecting the layer below. So it's a really good thing to use. I use it lots in my work, and I'm sure you will too, because it's just such a powerful tool. So now what we're going to do is go over to the adjustments menu, which is this magic wand icon, and go down to about 5th on the list, called Gaussian blur. So to apply this effect, we are going to go and drag our pencil across the screen. As you can see, it goes from harsh line to really soft, but we only want about 10-11%, and that just creates that gradient for us really quickly and really easily over a whole word rather than just individual letters, which is a really quick and easy decoration to apply. Next up, we can use the word scares, and we're going to apply some stippling shading to it. First off, let's create a new layer above the word scares. So stippling is a form of shading using just dots. So to give you an example, what it's like is, to create the dark tones, you have lots of dots close together, and you're constantly tapping to create those, and then to make those tones lighter, you start making less dots and spreading them out. And as you can see, you can get this dark to light tone. But as you can see in this method, it's a lot of repetitive tapping on the screen. And as I'm always looking for an easier way of doing things, let's just clear that. I've created a brush for you called a stippling brush. So what we can do is just run the brush up and down, and it will create loads of dots for us. So what I like to do is start by making the bottom third quite solid, lots of dense populated of dots, and then I can start tapping just to add a few dots above, and then I make my mid-tone by adding a few more in here, just less crowded than the base. And then you can zoom out just to see if you can see that gradient going on there, or squinting. And I use the eraser tool just with a monoline brush in if I just want to neaten up the edges. I like having a bit of a white border to it, and that takes much less time than constantly tapping your screen. And then when we go through the rest of the letters, we are just trying to make it consistent, so the level is always on the third where it starts to transition from the really dark tone to sort of the mid-tone. So sometimes I'd do either one letter at a time, or I'd go through just making the dark tone first, this lower third, and with this you're just painting rather than tapping your dots, which really helps the longevity of your pencil nib and of your screen actually, or screen protector if you're using one. And once we've done that lower third, then we can just start doing a few taps, a few brush strokes to fill. And what these dots do, it just adds a bit more texture to it than a simple gradient. And also, people don't know that you haven't dotted your letters. They think you've been spending hours and hours doing lots of refined dots. And there we go. And then we can just go through with a razor and just neaten up where the dots have maybe gone over the edge. And that's the advantage of doing it on another layer. You don't then erase the edge of the outline of your letters. Lastly, we're going to apply some line gradients to the word you. So we want to select the monoline brush from brushes. We're going to open our layers panel and click the plus icon, create a new layer. Make sure we're on black in our color. And then what we're going to do is about 2/3 of the way up our letters, we are going to fill them with a black color. We're going to leave a little white margin between the shape and the edge of our letter. So just drawing around. It doesn't have to be super accurate because we can edit that in a minute. And then drag and drop the colour swatch into it to fill. And we're going to do that in the same sort of place along the rest of our letters. Drag and fill. And the last one, the U. Now what we're going to do to make it easier for ourselves is turn on the side so we can draw our lines down. So what we're going to select is the monoline brush in as an eraser, and then starting at the top we're going to raise it to create these lines. So the first line is, I'll start up here, the first line is going to be really thin. I'm going to just do it on the U and then we can copy it onto the rest of them. And then we want to make our next line about twice the size of that one. And then 3 times the size of the first one. And then one more line which is about 4 times the size of the first one. Doesn't matter how many lines you create, we're just doing 4 for now. Or end up with 5 of the black ones. And we can just neaten up that first line. But what it does is create this step down gradient of those lines. And we use that one as our reference now to copy it to the rest of the letters. And that gives us what I think is quite a cool effect.